Tonight, Mark Carney makes the case for Canada directly to U.S. business leaders.
Canada Strong will help make America great again.
Carney's pitch for a new trade partnership. Plus, At Issue breaks down Ottawa's strategy on trade. The U.S. and Iran close in on a deal to extend the ceasefire, but will Donald Trump sign off on it?
The president has developed a problem of credibility on this issue. We were about to get an agreement. How many times have we heard that?
What we're learning about the draft agreement, even as the two countries continue to exchange strikes. And the story of Iranian protesters in a movie made entirely with AI.
I did it after work or sometimes during work in a cafe.
The glitzy New York premiere and the backlash against it.
From CBC News, this is The National with Chief Correspondent Adrian Arsenault.
Thanks for joining us. The Prime Minister is making a new pitch to revamp the U.S. economic relationship and using language that may appeal directly to Donald Trump. Mark Carney now says a strong Canada will, quote, help make America great again. In front of a crowd of New York investors and financiers, Carney touted Canada as a good place to do business, part of his push to bring in investment and to coax the Americans to the negotiating table, even as Mexico and the U.S. launched their own trade talks. Carney also offered new details about specific proposals made to Trump's administration. But as Ashley Burke shows us, when the two sides will actually sit down is unclear.
The Prime Minister and his negotiating team in New York pitching a new relationship with the U.S. to the very people who could put pressure on Donald Trump.
Let's be absolutely clear. Canada Strong will help make America great again.
Mark Carney telling Wall Street and top American CEOs Canada is focused right now on building itself up and wants Americans to invest.
That future should include a new partnership with Canada, a true partnership that reimagines cooperation in specific sectors.
Carney said his government's pitched specific proposals to the Trump administration on autos, aluminum, and critical minerals.
With America's growing energy needs because of the incredible transformation here, does it really make sense to build the gigawatts here needed to replace Canada?
But some say those proposals haven't worked.
We're pretty firmly stuck.
Canada's former top trade negotiator told senators there's no sign that Canada's getting to the table with the U.S. to review CUSMA.
I think we really are in a position where we could be stuck for a considerable period of time. Canada is not going to be able to force the U.S. to come to the table.
Others say what Canada needs is American businesses on side.
Where we do see action is when business comes to the president and says, we have a concerted, aligned position on this.
The Canada-U.S. trade minister says he hopes to find a path forward in the next few weeks.
We remain optimistic that we can find a circumstance where we recommit to the trilateral trading agreement.
The government only has about a month until CUSMA is up for review on July 1st. Mexico is already doing its first round of bilateral talks with the U.S. LeBlanc is now aiming to go to Washington next week.
And so, Ashley, where are the Americans in all this? What are they saying?
Well, Adrian, tonight we're hearing from the U.S. ambassador to Canada, who has been airing his country's frustration and disappointment with Canada. In an online post, Pete Hoekstra writes, it's worth repeating what Carney said, that a strong Canada will help make America great again. And that, he thinks, is a message Americans can get behind.
All right, Ashley, thank you. That's Ashley Burke in Ottawa tonight. And Ottawa is pledging new help for the deadly Ebola outbreak with travel restrictions now in effect. Christine Birak shows us why the move is coming now and just how desperate the need for aid is on the ground.
Boxes packed with critical gear finally landing in the heart of the outbreak. This volunteer says the arrival of these medicines gives us hope. Hope that is desperately needed. A rare strain of Ebola has been spreading with alarming speed in the Democratic Republic of Congo for as long as 2 months. In the wake of deep cuts to foreign aid programs, the response on the ground is only now starting to take shape.
Canada has always believed that the best way to protect Canadians is to help the world.
Ministers offered a new $8 million commitment to the global Ebola response, a small fraction compared to last November when Ottawa slashed $2.7 billion from foreign aid over 4 years.
We will continue to monitor the situation and we will adjust our approach as the situation evolves.
And ahead of the World Cup, borders have slammed shut. In a trilateral statement, the United States, Mexico, and Canada have announced aligned public health travel measures, barring travelers from the DRC, Uganda, and South Sudan for 90 days.
We are taking precautionary measures. Is it perfect? Certainly not.
But the minister says Canada's not being pushed to act by the U.S.
We cannot and will not allow any cases of Ebola to enter the United States.
The U.S. will be sending Americans exposed to Ebola to Kenya for care, a move some Kenyan doctors call morally disturbing. In a statement, health workers say their country is being treated as a containment colony.
It does harken back to colonial days when powers would do as they wanted in other jurisdictions.
Public health experts warn aid cuts cripple defenses against the disease, and they say defunding systems that track deadly viruses blind African health officials to the problem, leaving Canada and the world more vulnerable. Christine Burak, CBC News, Toronto.
A 14-year-old girl named Esther, who was missing for nearly 2 weeks in Toronto, has been found safe.
We really utilized every resource we had to try to find Esther as quickly as we possibly could.
Police say she was located inside a home and appears to be in good physical condition. Hundreds of people joined the search, which also involved drones and canine units. Investigators are now looking into whether criminal activity played a role in her disappearance. And in Halifax, the mother of a newborn who was the subject of an urgent search has now died in hospital. When the 23-year-old was admitted on Friday in critical condition, she appeared to have just given birth but had no child with her. An extensive search led to the discovery of the baby's remains, and 2 people face multiple charges. They include disposing of the body of a child with the intent to conceal the fact that it had been delivered. Well, the U.S. and Iran have reached a tentative deal to extend their ceasefire by 60 days. But it still needs approval from Donald Trump. As Paul Hunter shows us, it's unclear when or if that will happen.
With countless oil tankers still jammed up in the waters near the Strait of Hormuz, and with missiles fired overnight from Iran intercepted by Kuwaiti forces, word emerged of a potential deal for a 60-day extension to the fragile ceasefire in the U.S.-Iran war. Keyword, potential.
We perhaps have the makings of a deal here.
U.S. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent on the tentative agreement to extend the ceasefire and trigger talks aimed at, as U.S. President Donald Trump has demanded, ending Iran's nuclear program, reopening the strait, and more.
President Trump has made it very clear that he has several red lines. He's not going to take a bad deal. He's going to make a great deal for the American people.
Trump has yet to agree to the possible ceasefire extension, but if both sides do sign off on it, a number of changes would kick in, including that Iran would agree to allow passage in the Strait of Hormuz and the U.S. would end its naval blockade of Iranian ports. In Iran, the chair of its National Security Committee acknowledged Iran is indeed trading messages on this with U.S. officials. But without giving details, he added the U.S. must first accept a number of Iranian conditions.
It certainly doesn't look like the kind of deal that would produce an end to the war,
says Leon Panetta, director of the CIA under Barack Obama. As the war drags on, there's no reason to trust the Iranian leadership on any of this, or, for that matter, Donald Trump.
I think the president has developed a problem with credibility on this issue, because he's constantly said that we were within a few days of ending the war, that negotiations were going well, that we were about to get an agreement. How many times have we heard that? And so I think the American people have kind of lost some trust in what the president is saying.
For now, Adrian, the potential deal to extend the ceasefire sits unsigned as the war now moves into its 4th month.
And Paul, we are also hearing from the vice president tonight on whether Trump might sign off on this.
We are. J.D. Vance underlining it is unclear even to him whether Trump will sign it. Hard to say, said Vance. And look, even if the ceasefire is extended, remember, it's really just a deal to allow for further talks on the hard stuff. No small feat getting those talks started, but the two sides would still need to find a lot of new common ground before there'd be real progress on actually ending the war. Adrian.
All right, that is Paul Hunter in Washington. Jean Carroll, the woman who sued Donald Trump for sexual assault and won, is now being investigated for perjury by the U.S. Justice Department. Two separate juries found the president liable for sexual assault and defamation against Carroll, a magazine columnist who said Trump attacked her in a New York department store 30 years ago. U.S. media is reporting she is now being investigated for possibly lying under oath. It is just the latest in a series of Justice Department investigations into those perceived to be the enemies of the U.S. president. Well, there are new calls tonight to address the surging demand for mental health services in Canada as physicians struggle to keep up. Data from the Canadian Institute for Health Information shows nearly 30% of adults reported a mental health condition in 2023. That is up from 20% in 2016. Tashana Reid shows us the growing strain on both doctors and patients.
At 16, Margaret Bolt was diagnosed with anxiety and depression. Then she started to self-harm.
I felt like I wasn't being seen or heard, and it was very distressing and harmful to me.
Her condition got worse as she struggled to access appropriate care. Now, a new report is shedding light on where Canadians are turning for help with mental health and substance use issues.
We're seeing more and more patients going to their family doctors and pediatricians.
The report found visits to family doctors for psychotherapy and counseling has increased almost 50% since 2015, while pediatricians saw a 60% jump.
For some of my patients, I'm the only place that they can go.
Dr. Rita McCracken estimates up to 25% of her patients come to her with mental health disorders and addiction issues.
This is not work that family doctors should be doing.
But addressing their unique needs, such as longer appointments and ongoing specialized care, is a challenge.
I should do it when there is no other option, but in a more ideal situation, I should be able to hand off.
But there aren't enough healthcare workers to meet the demand, and patients are up against high costs for private treatment and lengthy wait lists.
At one point, we had almost up to 1,000 people on our wait list.
At Women's College Hospital in Toronto, they're developing new programs to reach patients quicker.
Do people need to be waiting, a year, 2 years to be able to get that in an in-person setting, or could we offer some of that virtually?
Virtual group therapy has helped bring their wait list to less than 100 patients and reduced wait times to a few months.
It's been a groundbreaking program that's really changed our flow and gotten care to a lot more people.
As for Margaret, life is improving.
I'm 7 months in recovery, and I haven't harmed myself in almost 8 months.
A positive outcome in a system stretched thin. Tashana Reid, CBC News, Toronto.
If you are in a mental health crisis, there is help available. You can call or text 988, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Well, Jill Biden is speaking out about her husband, former President Joe Biden's disastrous 2024 televised debate. The former U.S. First Lady telling CBS Sunday Morning about her initial reaction that night.
I don't know what happened. I mean, as I watched it, I thought, oh my God, he's having a stroke. And it scared me to death.
Joe Biden's shaky, mumbling, and sometimes confused delivery during his debate with Donald Trump fueled fears among voters that he was too old for a second term. Biden dropped out of the presidential race a month later. Well, we are getting a preview tonight about what this wildfire season could look like across the country. Federal officials saying residents in BC will face the highest risk. Tanya Fletcher shows us the conditions that make that province so vulnerable.
These are the ones that dry out really quickly.
Dry conditions in Western Canada are fueling this year's wildfire threat.
We're also seeing record-breaking temperatures right now in places on the prairies, up in Saskatchewan and Manitoba, with some big fires of consequence already.
Wildfire activity across the country has started out relatively slow this year, but federal officials are forecasting a higher than average risk as the season goes on.
Above normal temperatures are expected across most regions of Canada over the next 3 months.
British Columbia faces the highest wildfire risk, especially in July. Next are Southern Ontario and Quebec, expected to be the highest risk in June. And Yukon and the Northwest Territories could also see higher than average risk later in the season. Right now, there are about 65 wildfires burning across the country. The good news is that looking nationally at the forest area that's already been burned, it's at less than 5% of the 10-year national average. Drought is the big concern. Despite multiple atmospheric rivers soaking BC over the winter, that rain's moisture didn't last.
That rain, worked its way through the forest down into the river system, back out into the ocean, instead of being accumulated as snowpack.
Ottawa has leased 10 new firefighting aircraft to prepare for wildfires, but some are calling for more to be done before the season really ramps up.
We seem to really focus on wildfire when the season starts. So late March, early April is when the government starts talking about what their plan is for that season. I want to hear the plan in October. When wildfire season is ending, I want to hear what we're going to do over those next few months.
Still, the warning from experts stands. The wildfire season is coming, whether we're ready for it or not. Tanya Fletcher, CBC News, Vancouver.
A 21-year-old Austrian man has been sentenced to 15 years in prison for planning a terror attack on a Taylor Swift concert. Nearly 200,000 of her fans were left disappointed back in August of 2024 when 3 nights of concerts were suddenly canceled after the CIA tipped off local authorities and the suspect was arrested. His identity remains protected by Austrian privacy laws. Well, there's some sad news from the hockey world. Former Montreal Canadiens player Claude Lemieux has died at the age of 60. Lemieux is being remembered as one of the NHL's most infamous antagonists. His gritty style of play earned Lemieux 4 Stanley Cup championships and a Conn Smythe Trophy as playoff MVP. Claude Lemieux's final public appearance was just days ago. On Monday, he carried the pregame torch into Montreal's Bell Centre ahead of the Canadiens' playoff game. Authorities believe Lemieux died by suicide. Well, the CFL has signed a new broadcast deal, and a quarter of the games are moving to streaming.
I do want to see what that production looks like before I spend my money.
What the change will mean for fans. A film made entirely by AI now featured at a major film festival.
I did it after work or sometimes during work in a cafe.
Innovation or dangerous precedent? Plus, a climb for the record books.
I'm going to the moon!
We're back in 2. The late broadcaster and curling champion Colleen Jones has been inducted into the CBC News Hall of Fame. Colleen died last November after a battle with cancer, and today her colleagues and loved ones honored her at an event in Halifax.
Colleen's magic was putting you at ease. Every single person she interviewed, she had this uncanny ability because of her genuine curiosity to put you at ease, and she was just captivated by who she was speaking to.
Colleen was also inducted into Canada's Sports Hall of Fame, and in 2024, she was invested into the Order of Canada. Well, the game is about to change for CFL fans. The league has announced 1/4 of its regular season games will be moving to streaming as of next year. Julia Wong now on what is behind the shift and how it's being received.
Alexander needs a touchdown.
The CFL has signed a new broadcast deal, one it calls the biggest in league history.
Harris, wide side.
Starting next year, 60 regular season games, the playoffs, and the Grey Cup will continue airing on TSN. But some preseason games will run on YouTube, and sports streaming platform DAZN will broadcast 21 games on Saturdays while holding the rights for the entire season internationally.
It's an exciting day for the league.
The deal is the way of the future, says the president of the Calgary Stampeders.
That is the reality of the world we're living in. You know, when you look at where young people, consume their sports, it's on digital platforms, and so that's how we reach a different audience.
One expert says it's also an opportunity to cater to fans in different ways.
YouTube obviously is going to look different than the TSN content. DAZN is going to look different than YouTube, and so it allows them to speak more broadly to different fans and consumers.
And it's on Prime.
The CFL is joining other sports leagues, such as the NHL and MLB, which have already made the jump to streaming. And while hardcore Edmonton Elks fan Scout Natick thinks the move is good, he's not committing to another subscription yet.
I don't know if I'm necessarily sold on it yet. I do want to see what that production looks like before I spend my money.
Something DAZN says is top of mind.
I understand the concern, and we do want to make sure that these games aren't hidden and not accessible. I think that we will take this to heart. We understand that change is always difficult.
The broadcast deal begins in 2027 and runs for 6 years. An evolution the CFL hopes enhances the game and its fan base in Canada and beyond. Julia Wong, CBC News, Edmonton.
A film made using AI premiering at a major festival is prompting a warning from industry insiders.
We have to look at, yes, what is going to be lost in the creative process and how important that is for humanity.
Why the director says there was no other way. After the break, Rosie's here with that issue. Hey, Rosie.
Hey, Adrian. Tonight, we're going to talk about Mark Carney's calls in New York for a new partnership with the U.S.
That future should include a new partnership with Canada, a partnership with a different Canada, a stronger Canada.
Could that call get negotiations back on track? What does it mean for Canada's goal of diversifying trade relationships? Chantal, Althea, and Stephanie Levitz join me to talk about that and a whole lot more.
Dozens of angry demonstrators gathered outside an Ottawa convention centre Thursday to protest against Canada's Global Defence and Security Trade Show. There were some minor tussles between police and protesters, but the gathering was mostly peaceful. CanSec is the country's largest annual military arms exhibition. Well, a film about recent anti-government protests in Iran is set to premiere at a major New York film festival, and it's creating controversy. The reason? It was completely AI-generated. Alexander Silberman has more on why the film was made this way and the backlash from some in the industry.
A film inspired by recent events in Iran, telling a story of resistance in the regime's brutal crackdown on protesters through the eyes of 5 strangers. But there are no actors, sets, or cameras. The film Dreams of Violets is entirely generated by artificial intelligence. Now set to premiere at the Tribeca Film Festival, the first AI movie to be part of any official festival lineup.
I did it after work or sometimes during work in a cafe.
The film's director says AI opens up opportunities for aspiring filmmakers with little resources. Dreams of Violets took about 3 months to make, with a budget of just $2,000.
This is a genre where the film was impossible. Financially, the subject matter, and it needs to be done very quickly.
The project's prominent platform is igniting further debate over AI in filmmaking, which has already been used to enhance visual effects, alter voices, and even replicate a late actor.
AI is not in itself art producing. So the limit case for what AI could and should do has yet to be fully determined.
The Tribeca Festival says it has long championed pushing creative frontiers. In a statement, the festival's director calls the film a powerful example of how emerging technologies like AI can be used not simply as tools of innovation, but as vehicles for deeply human storytelling. But the concept of AI creating entire films is deeply unsettling for many actors.
We have to look at, yes, what is going to be lost in the creative process and how important that is for humanity, right? But also the economics.
This debate now in the spotlight as generative AI disrupts the film industry, Alexander Silberman, CBC News, Montreal.
Tonight on The Breakdown, Rosie's here with that issue, and the team is talking trade.
At issue, Canada's relationship with the U.S. at a time of rupture and tension between the longtime allies. Mark Carney spoke to a U.S. audience about the need for a new kind of partnership.
That future should include a new partnership with Canada, a true partnership that reimagines cooperation in specific sectors that are deeply challenged by global competition. A partnership with a different Canada, a stronger Canada, a more confident Canada. Canada Strong will help make America great again.
So where do things stand in the Canada-U.S. relationship? How does picking partnerships with other countries affect that dynamic? I'm Rosemary Barton, here to break it all down tonight. Chantal Hébert, Althea Raj, and Stephanie Levitz is in for Andrew Coyne. Good to see you all. Althea, I'm going to start with you. A lot of what the Prime Minister said today sounded familiar. Some of it sort of made me raise an eyebrow, particularly that last line there about a strong Canada making America great again. And I wondered what you made of that and who you think he was actually talking to there.
I think he was talking to Americans. I think the Prime Minister has developed a tendency to adjust his message, sometimes in conflicting ways, depending on the audience that he is speaking to. And it is increasingly, I think, becoming obvious to Canadians that there's some elasticity in his message, shall we say, in terms of, on the one hand, you have the elbows up message. You have the framing of the Davos speech where the rupture is a relationship between Canada's relationship vis-a-vis the United States. You have a very important narrative that is set out there that has brought public support for things that previously were more controversial, like pipeline approval and speeding up assessments for other natural resource projects. And on the other hand, you have the message he delivered today, which in the case, the word rupture here was about the global order and the world, not about the relationship of Canada vis-a-vis the United States. We had a little bit of this floating in the fall. Remember when they were talking about sectoral tariff relief on the 232 tariffs, where we have a deeper integration with the United States on energy, potentially on critical minerals. And I think that is what the Prime Minister was hinting at. Yeah. But building Fortress North America is in conflict with the idea that our relationship is forever changed and we have to completely diversify. So it's interesting to see the Prime Minister trying to square that circle. And I think it could bring potentially some challenges at home.
I was listening to Minister Dominic LeBlanc on Power and Politics with David, and certainly, Chantal, there are lots of conversations happening around CUSMA and trade, but there doesn't seem to be any sort of concrete progress or a move towards an official negotiating table. And I wondered about that and then what the PM said and how those two things maybe fit together or don't.
Well, I think in the real world, there is no option but to try for Mark Carney to try to walk and chew gum at the same time, because you are not about to replace the United States as a trading partner by making deals all over the planet. You can diversify, reduce your dependency. But I mostly saw it as an attempt to walk away from or break out of the CUSMA box by saying, if you're just going to be talking about CUSMA, it's mostly defense. You're trying to keep what you have or not make it worse. If you break out of that box and you say there are places where there are wins to be had by the administration by making deals that also work for Canada, aluminum, et cetera, it's kind of an attempt to reframe the conversation, because at this point, from the outside, it sounds like the U.S. has a list of concessions they want out of Canada to keep CUSMA. Canada obviously is not about to show up saying, here's our act of rendition. So you try to find a way to make this a larger conversation and still achieve your goals. I don't know if it will work, but I know that what will not work is to tell Canadians that we will not be doing business with the United States in a more intense way than with other regions of the world, such as China or India, going forward, because that's not going to happen.
So is it, do you think, Steph, indicative of where the non-negotiations are at? Or is it, I mean, Pierre Poilievre, basically slammed the Prime Minister today because he's now, in his view, saying something different than he did before.
I mean, to pick up on what Althea said, there's elasticity in the Prime Minister's message, and where he seeks to tailor it, to whatever audience he's speaking to, it's almost as though he forgets there is no singular audience anymore. Everybody is watching what he said. So the American business leaders in that room are watching, but Canadians are also watching, and opposition politicians are watching. And when you see the Prime Minister make that reference to make America great again, and you think that's a lot of words to fit on a Canadian hat, like what is he trying to accomplish there? And I do think, to Chantal's point, it is a reframing. And it's trying to get away, if there's an irritant with the Americans, and they've raised it time and time again, it's the disparagement that Carney seems to show to the U.S. administration. That frustrates them. They understand the need for other trading relationships. They understand that Canada should go and strike these deals. It's when it's constantly being framed as because the U.S. is bad, that's the bit that gets under their skin. And so for Mr. Carney to come outside that box, as Chantal so well put it, and say, there's bigger gains here, there's bigger things we can do. I mean, we saw the U.S. ambassador sort of pick up on that and say, thanks for that positive language for a change. Yeah. And these negotiations are about tone as much as they are about substance. So this is a change of tone.
Is it too, on a week where, Althea, you've made a choice to buy fighter jets from Sweden instead of the United States, you need to show some goodwill to the United States so that you can get some talks going on other issues?
I think it's probably less about the Saab announcement than it is about the June 1st deadline. So we've often talked about the July 1st deadline, but the June 1st deadline is the deadline by which Canada, the United States, and Mexico basically have to have their list of grievances in that they'll discuss on July 1st. And so I think it's more about building towards that front. And then, we've also heard in the last few weeks, for example, we've seen negotiations between between the United States and Mexico gain a lot of momentum, and public threats from the Americans that they might do a deal together that would layer on top of CUSMA, and we would have a kind of take it or leave it approach. And we've had our Prime Minister play hardball in the sense that we're not going to go to the negotiating table because we don't want to make concessions preemptively. And why should we? Because you have these tariffs on us that are also illegal, and so you guys should also show some good faith. So I think it's a little bit more about resetting that and making sure that there's a constructive output. I was surprised yesterday hearing from the Ontario representative in Washington, David Patterson, that he believes we only have a window of up till Labor Day to get a deal struck. Otherwise, the Americans will be busy with their own midterms and then possibly impeachment and whatnot. And so if we want to actually have a firm deal on CUSMA, and I'm not sure that's actually where the government is, the federal government that is, but that you could see negotiations heat up. And you're kind of starting to see that, at least, this is obviously Ontario trying to put some pressure on the federal government.
Chantal?
Yes, except that short of the U.S. declaring that they want out entirely, there is the notion that we must get a deal by Labor Day doesn't actually work, in the sense that we are not going to all turn into pumpkins on Labor Day or anytime soon. And if the U.S. wants to give notice that it's leaving CUSMA, that will bring its share of problems on the U.S. administration. So it might be in the president's interest to have something to show on trade in time for the midterms, more than it is in the interest of Canada. So I'm not so sure manufactured deadlines will do a lot of good for the Canadian approach to this.
Okay, we're going to leave this part there. Thank you all. When we come back, though, we'll take a look at the resignation of Stephen Guilbeault from Liberal caucus.
There are many reasons that lead people to enter politics. In my case, it was a desire to pursue my quest for a better environment, for the fight against climate change, for nature protection.
So what does this resignation tell us about the Liberals' support for Carney's energy ambitions and the government's commitment to fighting climate change? That's next. At issue, climate advocate. After 7 years as an MP and minister, Stephen Guilbeault, the former climate activist, says he will resign this summer. Guilbeault says Canada is backsliding on climate action, and he's moving to take his fight outside of the political arena.
These 7 years, intense, demanding, and deeply meaningful, have been among the most formative of my life. I have I leave proud of what we have accomplished together.
So what does this departure tell us about the government's agenda on energy and climate? Let's bring everyone back. Chantal, Althea, and Stephanie Levitz, who's in for Andrew Coyne tonight. Stephanie, maybe I'll start with you. I was sort of struck by the lack of rancor and anger, either from Mr. Guilbeault. He was quite professional in his departure, and from the government side. There was not a lot of friction, even though Mr. Guilbeault obviously doesn't agree with what the government is doing.
Yeah, I found that interesting too. And, Prime Minister Mark Carney's reaction when he was asked about Mr. Guilbeault, it was almost like a shrug. It's like, well, I've got other MPs, so good luck, Stephen, and we'll see you when we see you. And, Mr. Guilbeault made a choice there, right? We've seen other politicians leave government benches, leave their parties, and burn it all down, to borrow a phrase. And he made a choice not to do that. Despite the fact, it's worth pointing out, when he left cabinet over the Alberta-Ottawa MOU, that was a scathing letter and a takedown point by point of how that MOU undercut the government. And so in some way, perhaps, he had already signaled his displeasure. He had already signaled that he was throwing his hands up. He, from what I'm led to believe, there were conversations continuously between him and the Prime Minister's office to find some way to keep him. And eventually those fell apart, and it's, a conscious uncoupling, to borrow a phrase in relationships. They just decided, okay, we're done.
And Chantal, what does that tell you about where the government is going? Because certainly Mr. Guilbeault was an activist politician. I mean, I think he would be comfortable with that, and obviously now feels like he will get more done outside of the arena than inside. So what does that tell you about the government's direction?
Well, even before Stephen Guilbeault announced that he was going to move on to other climate challenges elsewhere, it was pretty obvious where the government is headed. There has been every step of the way over the past year has brought the government closer to having dismantled just about every bit of the climate infrastructure put in place by Justin Trudeau. That's one choice, but not replacing it with something other. You rarely, if ever, hear now the Prime Minister explain in the same kinds of details that he likes to offer on his sovereign fund or go down the list, how he is meeting climate objectives, or if they even matter. Now, it was the show in the House of Commons was very civil, including the decision on the part of someone who resigns in theory on principle to continue to sit with the team he has resigned from until he leaves Parliament. But if you look at many of the interviews that Stephen Guilbeault has been giving and the conclusions that stem from that, this has been a pretty bad week for the Prime Minister in Quebec, where there has been a hit, and we may see consequences from it, because by now, if you do not know that Stephen Guilbeault left because what he told voters about Mark Carney turned out not to be true, then you have been living on another planet and not in Quebec this week.
And I fully understand that the Prime Minister's sort of power base is in Quebec, but on the other hand, Stephen Guilbeault's departure at a time when Alberta is threatening separation, and we're going to talk about that in the next block, is maybe not the worst thing politically for this Prime Minister in this moment. I take Chantal's point. It might be bad later, but in this moment anyway, Althea.
Can I just say, Alberta is not threatening separation, but the Parti Québécois, the front runner in the Quebec election, is. So pick your battles.
Yes. Okay, Althea.
I think it is really interesting to see how this decision is playing out in kind of the two solitudes in the country. In Quebec, there has been so much ink spilled about who is Mark Carney. And if Stephen Guilbeault cannot find a place in the Liberal caucus, and he doesn't feel not just that his legacy is still intact, but that he can't advance the things in a way that will have any result, and he doesn't want to give the government, and he said this in an interview with your colleague from Hudson, Canada, he doesn't want to give the government the benefit of being the moral conscience for other MPs who are climate-minded or voters who see him and think, well, it can't be that bad because Stephen Guilbeault is still in caucus.
That's right.
That's why he's taking his exit. And you do have, on the other side of the country, especially in Western Canada, people who are like praising that Stephen Guilbeault is like, good riddance, happy to see you gone. We think you're responsible for 10 years of horrible economic growth. I mean, I don't think it's fair to pin that on the former minister, but, but there are definitely these different clash points. I think it speaks to, and I think this is where Chantal is going, like the things that are good for addressing Alberta separatism actually hurt the cause of the federal government in Quebec. And I don't, from my reporting, I don't believe, and I have not heard that the Prime Minister's office tried to keep Stephen Guilbeault. If anything, you know, he took his fight publicly because he couldn't get anything done behind closed doors, writing in my newspaper about what he hoped the Memorandum of Understanding with Alberta would look like. And they did nothing of what he suggested. And on the things where he did have an impact, on the nature strategy, on the international climate finance, I think those were seen as two, I don't want to say minor wins, but that legacy can continue without him there. And so what's the point of him staying? It's really weird, if we can just like take a moment to reflect, to have somebody leave in these circumstances. And I think it is quite significant. You know, Mark Carney has gotten a lot of floor crossers. Now this is somebody who's choosing to leave because of the government's record.
Steph?
Yeah, I mean, I'd pick up on that in the sense of this pendulum that continues to swing with, is it Alberta that is, you know, going to get the attention today, and then that swings away from Quebec? Is Mark Carney then going to swing back to Quebec? We have David Eby, if we're going to talk about sort of the national unity debate, saying, I'm really not getting any attention. Nobody's talked about Doug Ford lately in Ontario and what some of the pressure points are there. And one of the interesting things as we move into this national unity debate that we're in, what's the pop-off valve, which is to say, how is Mr. Carney and also inside his caucus going to reconcile all of this? I mean, a lot of folks looked at these floor crossers and said, Mr. Carney is going back to a different kind of Liberal Party. He's going back to more of a brokerage party. He's going back to everyone has a home in this big red tent. But clearly everyone does not have a home in this big red tent. And maybe that's okay. I mean, not everybody has to have that home, I suppose, if they don't want it. But there is definitely a progressive faction in that caucus that was looking to Mr. Guilbeault as their leader, as someone who was going to keep up the fight internally. So what happens to that faction, and how does Mr. Carney keep them aligned with his broader cause and ambition?
Well, given none of them seem to want to be very public about their criticism at this stage, it'll be interesting to see whether they do anything on that front. Okay, thank you all for that. That is it for us on the national anyway, but we're going to keep talking. Talk about how some other premiers are pushing back on what we were mentioning there, Alberta's referendum question. Catch that on YouTube or the At Issue podcast. Now back to Adrian in Toronto.
Thanks, Rosie. Coming up, a young climber takes on El Capitan.
How hard is it for a 6 or 7-year-old to do it? I'd say it's almost impossible.
Agreed. His record-breaking performance next in our moment. So this is Joe Evermore and his son Joey just moments after they finished their 6-day ascent up El Capitan in California's Yosemite National Park. So Joey became the youngest to ever conquer the mountain, breaking his older brother's record. Now his historic climb makes our moment.
I'm coming to the mountain!
We climbed El Capitan over 6 days. He had a team around him supporting him, so he didn't have to do any of the hard or dangerous aspects. How'd you sleep? Joey was ready.
I started at 6. I had my birthday.
How hard is it for a 6 or 7-year-old to do it? I'd say it's almost impossible.
High five, Joey Danger.
He broke his brother's record. Tell him.
I broke my brother's
Step to him.
7-year-old.
Give it up, just like that. This is so nuts.
Wow, dude. It takes tremendous coordination and training and resolve.
Looking good.
He has to be willing to face unbelievable exposure. Imagine 6 days of hanging from your fingers with ascenders or hanging from your anchors and living on this wall. It's as good as it gets. To be a dad, seeing your kids excel, seeing them overcome hardship.
Okay, I'm just dizzy looking at it. Joey, you're amazing. And when Mabel, our producer, asked him, you know, how'd you feel, Joey, when you got to the top? He just said he was hungry, which is fair enough. He'd had a long day. From all of us at the National, thanks for being with us. I'm Adrienne Arsenault. Take care.